Still the big story. The final report of the State Capture Commission has highlighted inconsistencies in President Cyril Ramaphosa's testimony on the looting of state resources. The report also raises questions about Ramaphosa's testimony regarding the work of the high-level review panel on the State Security Agency. Newzroom Afrika's Tumaole Mohlaoli has been following this story quite closely for us. He's live to us in our studios this morning, and of course, Tumaole, we're still going through those heaps of volumes, as it were, of those final two parts of this inquiry's report. But what we now have been able to come across is these questions around Ramaphosa's testimony. Before we speak about that, help us place why testimony around specifically the SSA was so explosive.
Well, testimony around the SSA was very explosive because on the eve of the testimony, we saw how the ministry itself, the State Security Agency ministry, came in and tried to interject the testimony, particularly of one Loyiso Jafta, who was Deputy Director General there, to say that it was concerned that it would compromise active agents. It wasn't sure what Loyiso Jafta's testimony would entail, and therefore the affidavit that he submitted before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry had to be studied extensively. Now, the Zondo Commission of Inquiry at the time pushed back, saying that his testimony would therefore be edited, if you would, so that he would avoid exposing active operational issues and would stick to the issue of what had actually happened in terms of compromising and exposing the State Security Agency to state capture. We know that Loyiso Jafta's testimony was quite explosive because he unpacked what was happening in the shadowy underworld of the State Security Agency in terms of how agents were recruiting other agents without vetting people properly, without prior authorization, a culture of wanton, misuse of state security funds, whereby agents were buying houses. The State Security Agency was buying properties. Those properties weren't properly listed. Therefore, there was no way of actually finding out how much money was spent, where, how. And also what was quite concerning was the proliferation of arms and where those arms were and what those arms were used for. Now, what also came out, interestingly enough, was the question of a second shadow state that reported directly to former President Jacob Zuma, according to testimonies that was given by, of course, Loyiso Jafta, but also by Sidney Mufumadi, who was one of the authors of the high-level review panel into State Security Agency, which tabled that particular report to government in form of parliament and raised those particular concerns. So this was the issue. The looting in terms of the State Security Agency itself ranges up to some estimates over $1 billion. So that also goes to show just how the capture of the State Security Agency was a problem. What was also of key concern, Ayanda, was the fact that the State Security Agency, according to its testimony that came out before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, did not conduct its operations as tasked and mandated under its terms of reference, but was rather concerned with the inner workings of the internal politics of South Africa, therefore exposing the country to possible external risks.
Of course, Ramaphosa would be asked what he knew about what's taking place at the SSA, and more specifically what he's done about that. The inquiry itself finding that he told more lies than truth. I mean, you'll phrase it better than I am.
Yes.
What exactly did it say?
Well, the inquiry finding that he was less than honest about his testimony before the Commission of Inquiry. When quizzed specifically about what was going on in the State Security Agency, he then had said that he did not necessarily know what was going on, and the question there was, as the second in command at the time under the Zuma regime, he would have been appraised as Deputy President about what was going on, and of course he would have been given that high-level review panel document as it was presented before government, because he was head of government business. So he would have had that particular document. Therefore, he would have been in tune with what was going on in terms of the recommendations, in terms of trying to find out what's going on in the State Security Agency. So to come to the Zondo Commission of Inquiry during his testimony and say that he was not abreast and he was actually shocked about what was happening when quizzed was something that was of great concern to the Commission, and in its findings, it puts that squarely out.
Yeah, what was also pointed out by Ramaphosa is that the investigations looking into what was taking place were at an advanced stage. We later learned that, in fact, investigations were halted at some stage and didn't reach the kind of stage that Ramaphosa, in some ways, was painting. whilst he was on the stand at the commission, the impression he gave.
Yes, that impression was something that was spoken to very strongly in this final report, because it created an understanding or a view that the review panel's investigations were complete, and therefore the restructuring of the State Security Agency was now at a stage that could be undertaken. However, one of the recommendations of the review panel, high review panel into the State Security Agency, and this is something that both Loisa Jafta and Sidi Mufumadi did tell the Commission of Inquiry, was that there was a pushback both from the Parliament and also from the State Security Agency, and that when they did try to get support to say this work is quite important, we are not looking to undermine and compromise the operational aspects of the State Security Agency in terms of its mandate, but trying to understand just how deep the rot is and what can be done, and therefore we need more access. That was pushed back. So therefore, the recommendations and the findings of that particular report says implicitly that more needs to be done. Therefore, its work is complete and cannot be considered a complete work without those particular recommendations being implemented, which means that perhaps another review panel would have to go in, if those recommendations are agreed to understand exactly the scope of rot within the SSA and the scope of dysfunction, one would say.
Sure. So much already to chew on, and we're not even through the entire report. Tumaole Mohlaoli, for now, thanks very much indeed for helping us make sense of that particular development. We're still going through that final part of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry's report, and as soon as we are able to piece together the different elements, as it were, we'll continue giving you these tidbits so that you can make up your own mind about what actually took place during those years.